It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
And welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett, and I'm joined as always by one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, Kent Myers. And Kent, today a subject that really touches all Oklahomans.
Yes, it does. And no matter your station in life or your income or anything else, the cost of prescription drugs in Oklahoma is the subject we're going to be talking about today with a fellow that is well equipped to talk about it. He's done a lot of research on it, and he's returning to The Verdict for another visit, Representative Ron Kirby from Lawton. He is proposing a bill to establish a maximum price for prescription drugs in Oklahoma. It's quite an interesting subject. It's one that is going to be have some controversy attached to it, and we're going to get a chance to talk to Representative Kirby about that. But it is something that affects all Oklahomans, perhaps the elderly more than others, but at least everybody is involved with the cost of prescription drugs, and they're high.
Well, I think a lot of us are anxious to learn more. This morning, a visit with State Representative Ron Kirby. He's working on a bill that could affect the price of prescription drugs in Oklahoma. It's next on The Verdict. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers is going to introduce today's guest.
We are very pleased today to have a return visit from the Honorable Ron Kirby, the Democratic State Representative from the Lawton area, District 64, has been serving there 10 years. Ron obtained his undergraduate degree from Northeastern State University, Tahlequah. He was a professional broadcaster for 40 years. He's married with one daughter. And we are really pleased to have you back to talk about a subject that I know is near and dear to your heart, the maximum price for prescription drugs in Oklahoma.
Well, thank you very much for having me back. It's always a real pleasure for me to get the word out as to what we're trying to do at the legislature.
Well, let's focus, before we get to the fix, let's focus on the problem. What is the problem of the price of prescription drugs in Oklahoma?
Well, along with many other things, we have found that research, and you don't have to be a great fanatic or analytic mind to figure out that a lot of our senior citizens in particular, when they're on a fixed income, with the price of prescription drugs keep rising and rising, and granted there are new prescription drugs out on the market that are life-saving prescriptions and pharmaceuticals that we need to be purchasing for longevity, for the quality of life. And certainly nobody is denying that. It remains, though, that many senior citizens who are on fixed incomes, or I keep referring to them, there are others who are on fixed income, when they receive health care and are offered prescription drugs, they have to make a choice as to whether to buy those prescription drugs or go hungry. And that's just not acceptable, not in the state of Oklahoma.
So should the state legislature get involved?
I think so, because it is that time, because many of our citizens, particularly in nutrition centers, you visit them or any of our medical facilities, you will find that the indigent, the below average income, if you will, the others that need prescription drugs are the least ones that can afford them. And the price of prescription drugs is outlandish. The cost of your insurance, let's equate it back to the three people here at this table. The cost of our health insurance has gone up rapidly, and over 70, I think it was close to 80% of that increased cost on your health insurance premiums has been attributed to pharmaceutical or prescription drugs.
Now, we hear all the time about people going to Canada to buy drugs. The National Center for Policy Analysis has put out a study that indicates that Of the 27 largest selling generic drugs that there are on sale anywhere, 21 of those are sold in Canada at a price higher than what those generics are available for in the United States. And apparently across the board, if you'd average prescription drugs with name brand prescription drugs and generic prescription drugs, overall the average Canadian pays more for his prescription drugs than the average United States citizen. Aren't we going to fix the price in relation to the Canadian price? And if so, is that a wise thing to do?
Well, first of all, I think your figures that you're using are somewhat skewed. Fact remains that the Parliament of Quebec sets the price, which under Canada, we know that they have socialized medicine. They say that you must offer a discount or they negotiate for the best price available. You must meet that price if you want to do business with the province of Canada or the country of Canada to get on, quote, a preferred list. That means you do not have to have prior approval. They will not recognize it under this proposed bill that we will set up a blue ribbon panel composed of members, obviously, from the House of Representatives appointed by the Speaker of the House, Senate President Pro Tem, and the Governor, and others, the pharmaceutical companies themselves, to use the Parliament of Quebec as a guideline to simply establish the pharmaceutical drugs that we will use. And if they do not offer the discount to the state of Oklahoma, they will not remain on the preferred list. Obviously, the preferred list, you do not have to have prior authorization to be covered by insurance. If you do not stay on that list, obviously, you have to get prior approval. Nobody really wants that. The fact remains that in Canada, the prescription, or let me back up for a second, if you pay for, quote, that pill in the state of Oklahoma or the United States, you're paying $1. In Canada, you're paying an average of 60 cents, and in Mexico, you're saying you're paying for that same pill 40 cents. Pharmaceutical companies need and should make a reasonable and fair profit because, of course, research and the better quality of life that they are affording us. Nobody is saying give it to us at your cost, but we are saying be reasonable. This affects each and every one. You yourself may not have to have prescription drugs, but the fact remains your neighbor is, and the cost of those prescription drugs are going up. Therefore, as we all know, your insurance companies are in this business to make a profit, believe it or not. So consequently, your insurance premiums are skyrocketing out of control. Your HMOs, your hospitals will tell you this. It's due mainly because their cost to the physicians themselves and to the facilities remains relatively fixed. But the cost of prescription drugs is skyrocketing literally out of control.
Why isn't the free market system working here? Who's messing up the free market system?
That's a good question. I think it comes down to just a question of greed. The United States will pay for it. The citizens will pay for it. And how do you question your doctor when he prescribes a certain drug? You don't know whether to shop around. You don't know whether generics are available. We see massive amounts of advertising out saying, use such and such pill, prolongs life, see your doctor, etc. And it seems to be working. You and I might laugh at that. If you pay close attention, the side effects may include vomiting, diarrhea, death, etc. Who would want something like that? But the fact remains, we're in a powerful medium, and the medium of television, and people come in and ask for these prescription drugs by name, and it appears to be working. When you visit with your physician, and your physician prescribes certain medications, certainly that's what you want, and no questions. And a lot of people just do not question it because why? They're covered by insurance. So we're talking about the people that are on Medicare or have no insurance, or the indigent people, and they're left out there flapping in the breeze. They don't have a choice. They can't say my insurance will cover it. We go back, and if it is covered by our insurance, we kind of say, so it costs $1 a pill, so it costs $50 a pill. My insurance company picks it up. What they don't realize is that costs you, me, and your neighbor rise in premium cost for your health insurance.
Ron, let me ask you another question. If the theory of what needs to be done in Oklahoma, and we're going to get to your bill in this next segment of the show, but the theory is that the price ought to be controlled. Aren't we converting the prescription drug business in Oklahoma into a public utility, just like the electricity or the telephone, where the state tells the seller how much can be charged? And if that is true, do you expect to run into some Republican opposition from a free enterprise standpoint?
Obviously, that's the dilemma that we face. I do not think it will be the Republicans or the Democrats. I think it will be a coalition of both. This bill will have bipartisan support. It will have bipartisan opposition. Depends on where you stand on that line.
Yeah.
But we all can agree that the cost, when you have an industry that refuses to regulate itself, then it is time for government to say, you either regulate yourself or we're going to regulate you, it for you. This bill will be patterned after the bill that was developed in Maine, which simply follows and it's almost an exact duplicate.
See, we're going to get to that in the next
Sure.
segment. Why don't we take a break now and
Sure.
we'll start with that topic. Ron Kirby, state representative. He's got a bill that could affect the cost of prescription drugs. It's next on The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers back on The Verdict. This week's guest is State Representative Ron Kirby. We're discussing a proposed bill which could have an effect on the pricing of prescription drugs in Oklahoma. And Ron, I know the state of Maine has already reacted to the high cost of prescription drugs. What have they done, and are you modeling your bill after what they've done?
Actually, yes. To the question of are we modeling it after that, it's almost an exact duplicate. It was challenged through the court system, went to the Supreme Court, and almost all of it has been said that it is perfectly legal. Therefore, I think that we have states now that are paying attention. This is not, Oklahoma will not be the only state to introduce an exact duplicate, if you will, tailor-made to their particular states. I think we already have something like 10 or 12 states lined up to introduce a similar bill. And I personally think it is good, not only from the fact it will, we keep talking about cost factor, but let's face facts, we're talking about saving people's lives, caring for them, giving them better quality of life and longevity. And I think that's important in today's society, and that's why I'm so interested in making sure that this bill does pass.
Well, taking that theme just a little bit farther, I saw some additional data that indicated, by the way, that it looked like there were like 16 states that were going to present bills like yours. Well, in your favor. And the argument is also made that by controlling prescription drug costs and making sure that prescriptions are readily available and the choice between having them and not having them doesn't have to occur, that prevents more hospital visits, prevents greater illness, and in the long run lowers the cost of health insurance across the board, even to those who are not deeply involved in prescription drugs. I suppose that's some of your rationale.
Well, there are any number of scenarios that you can come up with, and they all have their pros and cons. But the fact remains that the pharmaceutical companies themselves fail to regulate themselves. They all will step forward and say, we have a good plan for the elderly, a good plan for Medicare, people that cannot afford. All they have to do is fill out these forms, be prior approved, etc. Nobody really knows those plans exist, nor will the majority of the people that would use those or benefit from it know how to even comprehend of filling those forms out and going through the procedures. Yet when we go to the physician and he prescribes something, we want immediacy. We want it now. And you make a very good point. We're trying to get the attention of the pharmaceutical companies. Say, look, we want you to research. We know that you're doing good, and yes, you deserve a profit. But exorbitant profit where people can no longer afford health insurance, and there are people that are on fixed incomes that really have to make choices every day as to whether to buy food for the refrigerator or get their medication. And that's not acceptable. The pharmaceutical companies don't want that. And they talk a very, very good game. And they can give you all sorts of scenarios. We're doing research, we're saving lives, and my heart goes out to them. Yet at the same time, statistics shows they're abundantly rich. Of course, they're interested in making profit. And you almost get a tear in your eye till you turn around and you see that little lady trying to cut that pill into and only take half of the prescription dosage. And I hear those horror stories all the time. And that is not acceptable. And the prescription companies, maybe, hopefully, with all the attention being focused on this bill, that they will come around and offer a legitimate plan. But don't give a pie in the sky. And I've heard those many, many times. Pharmaceutical companies come in, they give you a bleeding heart story, and like I say, you almost get a tear in your eye. Till the fact remains, these people are very well heeled, very well money-wise. They have it all. And nobody denies that perhaps they deserve at least some of it, not all of it. Just be fair, and matter of fact, we've named our bill the Fair Prescription Price Bill.
Yeah, the Oklahoma Prescription Drug Fair Pricing.
Correct. Thank you.
And it's going
Always count on you.
It creates a fair pricing board.
Correct.
What would that board do?
Well, they would, again, check with and use the Parliament of Quebec as the major guidelines. It would be appointees by the governor, the Speaker of the House, the President Pro Tem, the pharmaceutical companies themselves, the head of the Pharmaceutical Association in Oklahoma has approached me. He thinks he should be approached that. The druggists certainly should be represented, as the pharmaceutical companies. It needs to be a broad section that can give every aspect, both pro and con, of this pricing guidelines, if you will. And nothing says that anything should be set in concrete, but it is an overall process of getting the pharmaceutical companies to come to the table and say, here is our pill that we charge $1 for. Maybe if we can offer it to our teachers and the people that are under the Oklahoma health care plan, we can offer this for 85 cents to the public for 84 cents. At least we've started somewhere. And we have to do something because the medical, if you don't believe your price of medicine and medical care has gone up, try a visit to your local emergency room. It will, like I say, you'll think twice about even going. And when you get to that point, it's scary because people do deserve health care. And the advancements that we've had in technology, pharmaceuticals themselves, have produced a better quality of life. Yet, we are denying, and we have all of scenarios in government, we are denying access to the health care benefits to our indigent, to our elderly, just because of price.
I'd like to get to the graphic if we can.
Sure.
Yeah, let's quickly pull up
Sure.
a graphic. It's a three-tiered pricing structure your bill contemplates. The manufacturer can charge the wholesaler what I've referred to as the Canada price for the drug. I realize that's it's Quebec, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the wholesaler in Oklahoma can charge to the retailer the Canada price plus an overhead and profit figure. Retailer can charge the consumer the wholesaler price plus an overhead and profit. Your board would administer price controls at all three levels.
Correct. We got about 30 seconds, Ron. Why don't you jump in here? And,
Well, certainly.
what should the viewer know about that graphic?
Well, I appreciate the graphic, and I think for a fact it is very true. Obviously it's true. But the fact is that we believe even the Canada price, that the pharmaceutical companies can make a fair and reasonable profit.
This will be in the next session?
Yes.
All right. Representative Ron Kirby on the verdict. Kent Myers and I'll be back with a few final thoughts in a minute.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Be careful. Same to you. Same to you. Take your second.
We are back to wrap up another edition of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Ron Kirby can sure sell his story, can't
Yes, he can. Of course, he's been doing that on the air for 40 years, so he knows how to do it. But this subject that he's brought up is something that I think will generate a good bit of controversy. Nobody could argue with the proposition that prescription drugs would be better if they were less expensive. At least it would be more acceptable to buy them and to use them if they would be less expensive. But whether or not we're willing to change the pharmaceutical industry into a public utility like an electrical company or a telephone company, and have the price regulated by the state at all three levels, manufacturer, wholesale, and retail, is something I just don't know. I can't predict, and obviously our viewers will have their own views about whether that's good government policy or not. The assumption is that the free market is not working. You usually don't get to the public utility concept until you have determined that the free market either cannot or will not serve as a regulator of prices and output in its normal course. And for the government to step in at this stage on prescription drugs and impose those price restraints is an acknowledgement that the free market cannot work. And whether our Oklahoma representatives and senators are there yet philosophically or not, time will tell. But I think it'll generate good debate.
Well, it was a good show. We'll be back next week with another exciting edition of The Verdict. Until then, get on our website, theverdict.tv, and give us an idea that you'd like to see for a show. Thanks again to our guest, State Representative Ron Kirby. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett, and we will see you next time on The Verdict.